So here's the first exercise of the lecture, Introduction to Modern Brain-Computer Interface Design. What you will do in this exercise is implement an ERP-based brain-computer interface basically from scratch in MATLAB without any extra toolboxes or anything pretty much. But I'm not asking you to implement everything from zero. There's a bit of scaffolding that that is just doing some logistics, and you are only implementing basically the core equations, So what you implement is, among others, shrinkage LDA using a particular regularization parameter. You will implement the prediction function for this BCI, so the whole prediction function, including feature extraction, and the loss function that eventually evaluates the misclassification rate of this classifier. So there's two tips. The first one is the equations for these three things are all in the slides. So each of these three steps is there. And the second one is, if you're coding, if it's sort of the first time that you're really coding with MATLAB, it's very, very useful if you run through this to look in the command line and see if you're having the shapes of your vectors and matrices correct, row vectors versus column vectors and things like that, just to make sure that this is not the issue, because this is actually the most frequent problem that you encounter when you type up mathematics. Because in mathematics we usually don't care about whether it's a row, column vector, so we just write it up. And in MATLAB it's when then the interpreter starts to cough up these problems. So to run this, you just start MATLAB. You get the exercise package from the website and extract it, and you cd into whatever your path is to this exercise package /ex1. And there is several scripts there, and the script that ultimately you need to get to work is called run evaluation. So you type edit run evaluation, and so you now have the editor open. And what you'll find there in the same folder where this is this script. What it basically does is it loads the data and it runs a bunch of other functions, namely these three property. And these functions are sort of incomplete stubs or scaffoldings. They just have a bunch of predefined parameters like x and y and so on, and the actual meat of it is missing. So that's the part that you pretty much need to implement. Shrinkage LDA is the one that you implement in train ERP.m. The prediction function goes in test ERP.m, and the eval MCR is a very small function that just calculates the average misclassification rate. After you've filled in these three missing parts, the run evaluation function should run smoothly. And what it will do is it will calculate then the percentage of misclassified trials, and if you did it all right, it should be about 8%. Misclassified. So it's actually pretty good. It's the flanker data, if I remember correctly, that we just discussed. You should actually also get approximately the same plots if you were able to plot it. So if you are a MATLAB expert and you want to get a little bit more out of this exercise, you could go on and improve the code a little bit more and implement, among others, a bandpass filter before your feature extraction using FFT and IFFT. I'm talking about that because that's not using any toolboxes. Secondly, you could try to use your prediction function in a pseudo-online manner. You can play back your data through this prediction function, sort of in a loop where you basically fast forward to the next sample, call the prediction function, draw sort of the output, next sample, run prediction function, show the output, and then you should get either some kind of a moving bar or maybe a trace of the running output of the BCI. And one more thing that you could try to do is enhance the prediction function a bit, so that as opposed to taking a fixed length chunk, it can take any chunk length, any input length, and internally sort of buffers it. So, so that any subsequent calculation internally runs on the right chunk length. Because that kind of prediction function can then be used with pretty much any hardware. You can use any EEG device, and no matter what it happens to spit out, you can just take the most recent chunk, send it through the prediction function, and get your BCI output. So if you do this, this is basically something that you can instantly use for real ERP BCI. And you would query it whenever you are basically interested in BCI output. If you're a MATLAB newbie and you're having trouble, I suggest reading the documentation. But here's a few of the most common issues that people have in this exercise. If you're having to calculate the mean of something, there's a function for that. It's called mean. If you want to calculate the covariance matrix of something, there's a function. It's called Kothe. Furthermore, the shrinkage LDA has an S variable here. You can set it to 1, yeah, in this particular example. And one more thing, the bias that you calculate, the B, is a number. It's a scalar. You know, it's not a matrix. So if you get a matrix, you did something wrong. And if you have a matrix and you want to turn it into a vector, so you can do an inner product with another vector, there's a very simple expression in MATLAB to do that. It's this here, you know, bracket, colon, bracket, that turns a matrix into a vector. And the last one is you should make sure that your outputs are either -1 or +1, otherwise your misclassification rate will probably produce some garbage. And so that's all I can say about this exercise, and good luck.